Get ready to strap in. It's going to be a heck of a ride. It's like drinking from a fire hose. Never a dull moment, but yes, you'll hear the stories you won't hear anywhere else, and we appreciate you being here with us for them today. I'm Justin Barclay. Welcome in, folks. Welcome in. It is a heck of a ride today, a heck of a show, and in fact, let me just make sure you can hear. All right, an emergency transmission. Weren't really planning on doing this. I plan on being off today for my birthday, but I got to tell you, the news warrants us being here with you today. So. That's where we are. One nation under God. It's been a long fight, ain't over yet. We are in the thick of it. In fact, special guest with us, Pat Colbeck, former state senator in Michigan, election integrity warrior, rocket scientist, man of God. That's probably the first and foremost how do we get it. That's right. We got big updates for you. All right. Pat, thank you for doing this. I know you were up late last night like the rest of us watching the president's speech, and it was a doozy.
Yeah, well, first of all, happy birthday and happy vacation day. Let's face it, you'd be talking about this stuff on vacation anyway. Now you just get to talk about it with a lot more people.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Now, I told everybody I was going to be off today, but I'm seeing a few that were chomping at the bit to be on with us. So thank you so much for the folks that are watching behind the scenes in the live stream. Thanks to the folks at My Pure Health Solutions, healthwithjustin.com and mypillow.com and mystore.com/Justin, help empower the program every day. I really want to get, because this is going to be just an update, an abbreviated version, not going to do a full long show like we normally do, but I want to get into the meat and potatoes of what came out last night and what the president revealed. It's shocking, but I'm not shocked, which is kind of an interesting way to put this. So we know for a fact that what was reported last night. Now we have intelligence. These are documents that have been declassified from the president that really confirm things that Patrick, you, Mike Lindell, many of us, and like, where does Mike go to get his name back? You know, where does so many people that have been in this fight go to get their name back? Rudy Giuliani, some of these folks, you know, the mayor and the president, quite frankly, who said all along, look, we know there were issues, and it didn't take, you know, a rocket scientist to figure that out, although you were instrumental in working behind the scenes to do a lot of these things. But you could see, people could feel it. They were able to discern it, and you could see it clearly. Common sense would tell you Joe Biden got the most votes in the history of any other president, more than Obama. I mean, that's just insane. Anybody that has any sort of pattern recognition can look at that and say that just doesn't add up.
Yeah, most people realize that Joe Biden getting $81 million votes is a punchline, not a headline. So, yeah, last night, I personally, the key takeaway from President Trump's address last night, I think, was complete exposure of the suppression of the release of information around our elections.
Yeah.
And some of it started well before the president ever took to the podium last night, when CBS and ABC and NBC and CNN all refused to air the president's address, because they wanted to go off and filter and tell you what they wanted you to hear about what he said, rather than let you hear it unfiltered and actually go off and look at the documents that he's sharing with everybody. It was obvious that they were running a psyop. They wanted to tell you, from the good old Ministry of Truth perspective, what you were supposed to think about yesterday's address. And that happened even before the president took the podium, and it's going in steroids now.
And I will say this, and I really think we're going to have to really look at this. I'm not somebody who likes, I don't want to limit what anybody can say. Freedom of speech is not what I want to get to, but I do know, because I've been in the broadcast industry, since, gosh, I guess it's, what is it? 40 30 years now. And I'm looking at all of this. I understand the FCC. The number one rule that we're tasked with in any radio station, any broadcast entity, is to serve first and foremost, serve the public good. Well, these broadcast entities, these networks last night, many of them own actual, they're called O&O, owner operated radio stations, television stations. They have licenses in order to do this, and the FCC ought to take a close look at this, and they ought to completely these groups that are owned by NBC or ABC, whoever it might be, if they have them, they ought to pull their license. I know we dealt with this with Jimmy Kimmel. This is a final straw to me. This is massive national security related news and attacks by a foreign entity into our democracy, which they, again, we're a republic, but they claim to care about, and yet they would not air it, and we've got to yank the license. We cannot allow this sort of thing to continue, and they've all got to get in line, and they've got to make sure that they are reporting exactly what happened. And I'll give you a perfect example of why this is a big deal. You remember, folks, and I know Patrick does, but you remember the speech Biden came out and called half the country the enemy? Do you remember that speech? Biden came out and he stood in I think it was Philadelphia.
Yep, with a red backdrop. Yeah.
There he is with the red backdrop.
Red demonic backdrop.
And declared us all the enemy. And guess what? They had no problem airing that speech.
Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic.
This, with the military in the background, this was appalling. So they don't play it both ways, by the way. And this is, to me, maybe one of the biggest. We know China. We know these countries are constantly trying to angle and they're constantly trying to do things to attack us. We know that, but on the surface, that's one thing. The whole other piece, as you mentioned, maybe the biggest piece, is that our very own government. Now we know this is the deep state, the CIA, some of these intelligence agencies. Not only did they know that this happened, they took steps to cover it up and then hide it from the president himself. These people ought to be fired. And I think one might be able to make a case that these actions were treasonous.
I agree. They're treasonous. So that was a big takeaway. It was a full scale and scope of this information suppression to the American people. So when the Democrats and their media allies go off and tell you that there is no evidence of election fraud, they want to do everything they possibly can to make sure you do not see that evidence, which is why they did not carry the president's address live. And when you understand that this goes much deeper than the newsrooms of liberal media outlets, it actually goes into the halls of government, where the same people that are supposed to be informing the president on what the key strategic risks and concerns are with our national security, and they're suppressing that information. That is a big deal. And then when you also understand that foreign governments like the Chinese government, the Venezuelan government, the Iranian government are all active in going off and manipulating public sentiment in the United States with the flow of information to diminish people's support for President Trump, you start seeing the full scale and scope of what's going on. You also see what the president and folks like myself have been up against for the last 6 years or so, trying to get this information out to the general public. I mean, people have been deplatformed. They've been threatened with lawsuits. They've been had cease and desist letters issued at them. Almost everything zeroes in around this first hill in this battle to regain our country, and this hill is around information control, which is just one of the 10 attack vectors that I identified in that report that we released that the president's gone off and retruthed a few times. 799-page report, 824 findings, backed by 2,517 citations. Go to electioncrimebureau.com. You guys can download it. That is the information they do not want people to see, because they are vested in the false narrative that there was nothing wrong with the 2020 election. Our election systems are secure. We just saw that from Jocelyn Benson today. She went off and commented on the president's speech and said, our elections are totally secure. We're not going to let the president lie. And I just responded to her. I said, yeah, we realize lying is your department. I get it. But here's the issue.
Yeah.
So guys, please follow me up on social media, on X in particular, at PJ Colbeck. And there's a lot of information that I can point you to from yesterday's address with the president, including just a summary of what the president said, and then links to the actual documents he referenced during the speech, plus short video reels, like a 1-minute video reel summarizing the content of each of those document sets.
All right. So let me first, let me ask you, so we're kind of abbreviated today because of, like I said, we're not planning on being here today, but what time do I need? Is there a certain time you got to be out that we got a hard out for you today, Patrick?
No, not right now. I mean, it's all analytical time. I'm looking through the individual documents so that I'm preparing a.
There's a lot to pour through, folks. If you haven't been to whitehouse.gov yet, they dropped that last night. There's a lot to pour through. Patrick will be doing that, but I also recommend you go through and look at those yourself so you can see for yourself. Here's a little bit of the commentary last night. This is from News Nation, calling it espionage.
China is one of the biggest collectors of data on the planet. So if you take that 220 million voter rolls and you combine it with something called the SF-86, those are the security clearance applications that were compromised back in 2015, 22 million files. And then you combine it with all of the health information that's been hacked, you can really build this kind of digital composite of an individual. And you can use that for, voter registration fraud. You can use that for identity theft. And significantly, you can also use it to recruit American citizens to your efforts. So it's not just about the collection of the data around the vote. Exactly. Right. China is one of the biggest collectors.
Catherine is one of the best out there, and she's actually one of the few legacy media people that I actually trust her reporting on a lot of different issues. And I don't know if you remember this, but right in January of 2025, I think she took a photo in front of Gitmo. I think it was Camp Justice.
Yes.
So I think she knows a lot more than she's letting on this particular topic. But Justin, here's a story within the story on the voter roll stuff. So the president highlighted that the Chinese had data on 220 million voters in America. They had access to our voter registration.
That was
databases.
The hack.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so I want to put here's the story within the story on that.
Yeah.
According to the contracts that the state of Michigan has with our voting companies like Dominion and ES&S and Hart InterCivic, they are required to have an interface between their electronic voting systems and our Michigan's qualified voter file, which means that if the Chinese have access to Michigan's qualified voter file, the actual tabulation of the votes performed by these electronic voting systems is at risk as well, because those systems are connected to the state's voter registration database. And oh, by the way, so are our poll books. Our poll books actually get populated by the state voter registration database. So if you've compromised that central node in the election system known as our voter registration database, you have compromised the entire election system.
So how do we fix this? Because I was looking at last night what was said, and I think some of it, and I know a lot of people want to see accountability. We have a portion of it built in where the president did ask for investigations to begin, and we know those have already started ramping up to DOJ and some others. We got to have accountability. In fact, I just saw Sherry mention in the comments, if we don't see accountability here and arrests and all that, then we don't have a country. Well, folks, if we don't fix this, we don't have a country. You're absolutely right. So that's part of it. The other part, that's looking back. The other part is looking forward, because all of those people that they've hacked and they've been able to hack, all of that information is still valid. They still have that. How do we harden and secure elections moving forward? And that was the other piece that the president really made the effort to push towards, and we'll have to double down on these efforts now. Hopefully there's some lawmakers that weren't necessarily on board that maybe now about getting this Save America Act passed.
Yeah, and that's solution number one is pass the
Mhm.
Save America Act. Um, there's other solutions that I think have to be addressed as well, and that includes, to your point about accountability, we need to arrest some people because nobody's going to stop their behavior until they actually get held accountable for it. So, and if you look back at the president's speech last night, I mean, I was hoping to see, just throw me a bone, give me one indictment, give me one
Right.
criminal prosecution, right? And folks that have been involved in this investigation or elections for the last 6 years are anxious to go off and plant the flag on the hill and say, no, we're taking our country back. But the issue is we got to hold that hill. We got to hold that flag. We got to.
Mhm.
And right now, when you see the scale and scope of this information, where you understand why it's been so difficult to make headway on this, because it's very difficult to win in the courts of law before you win in the courts of public opinion. And the president, I think, eloquently outlined, even by the press reaction before his speech yesterday, what the headwinds are against us for winning in the court of public opinion. That's why he wanted a presidential address. That's why he wanted to go directly to the American people. And that's also why a lot of the media outlets made sure that he would not get direct access to the American people, which, to your point, I think is treasonous. So
Yeah.
that's
They're
solution
complicit.
number one. Yeah.
They're complicit. They're in on it.
Treasonous.
And this is absolutely, there's no other way to put it other than to plainly say that it is treasonous. And they know exactly what they're doing. And all of these individuals, I don't know how likely it's going to be to see some of the very top, but they all need to be held accountable here. So we've got the Save America Act that's got to be passed. We've got to go back and hold people accountable. But you mentioned there are other things that need to be done that would harden and secure our not only the way we vote. I mean, it's very simple to me. We could do one day voting. I think everybody shows up. I mean, unless you have a really specific scenario and need, or you can't be there, we can do those things differently. Folks that can't leave, obviously nursing homes, or you're in the military, things like that. We can figure that out. But there are other countries that do this, and they do it much quicker. We don't see these things dragging out. We don't see ourselves being left open to any sort of shenanigans, which I think there should never ever be in any even appearance of impropriety in any of this scenario. So we can do all those things. What else do we need to do to make sure that these things are done? And as you mentioned last night, I do believe the present part of the real issue of why this address was made, and it's just the beginning too, folks. We should probably mention that. It was to get this elevated so that people could understand again before the midterms here, and as we move into again 2028, which is going to be very critical.
So you got to get rid of the machines. The president was very clear with the intelligence assessments that were highlighting how the machines can be subverted and they can manipulate the votes without any detection whatsoever. And he did a little bit of an allusion to what was happening in Venezuela. And when you actually read the documents that he pointed everybody to, there was a CIA report specifically on how the Venezuelan government was compromised in their elections because of the machines being used to manipulate the votes without any sort of audit trail or ability to go off and detect it. So you got to get rid of the voting machines here in the United States as well. And I've got plenty of evidence in support of the fact that they're deliberately deleting audit trails and logs and everything else in our election. So the same things that happened in Venezuela, where Maduro became the illegitimate leader of Venezuela, happened in the United States as well. And we got a lot of data in support of that. But also, I think we need to do a cleanse, if you will, of our voter rolls. I mean, I'm to the point of saying hit the reset button on it. And just go off and have everybody reapply, if you will, and do so in a database that is secure. And right now, it's not secure. I mean, I've done multiple FOIA requests for who has access to Michigan's qualified voter file. And there are quite a few NGOs that have direct access into Michigan's qualified voter file to manipulate the data. And the results kind of speak for themselves. I mean, the voter history data changes every single month. Tim Vetter has been great at pointing this out with the DEEP project. He's been a great database analyst on this for quite some time. And our voter history keeps changing every month. Well, it shouldn't change at all after you submit the list of people who voted in an election. Yet in Michigan, I mean, for 2020 election alone, you look back and the official Michigan, state of Michigan records say that there were 499,850 more ballots cast than voters who cast a ballot in an election decided by 154,188 votes. I hate to use the word smoke nowadays for folks in Michigan here, but that is a smoking gun.
Pat, I got to ask you, this is a good question coming from the chat about Jocelyn Benson and why she would be even allowed to oversee her own election, which I think is an interesting comment in itself. And but it does also bring me to the point. Michigan got a shout out last night, and was texting back and forth with Patty, who's the one who kind of broke that story with was it GBI Solutions or whatever? I can't remember the name of it, but it was out of Muskegon. And bring us up to speed. She'll be on Monday to talk about it, but tell us. Because this is they caught this red-handed, this scam going on, and they buried it. And we know it was happening nationwide.
Yeah, and I think it was one of your listeners, if I'm not mistaken, who submitted the initial FOIA request. I think it was Keith Henkel, if I remember right, or somebody with Keith. Anyway, he got it to Patty, and Patty was like a pit bull on this and got it out into the national airways and made sure everybody knew what was really going on. And here's the bottom line, is that they had evidence, or an alert Muskegon clerk said, somebody just dropped off 12,000 absentee ballot or voter registration applications or whatever. And that seems kind of suspicious to drop all those in one day. And she's brought in the Muskegon police. They investigated. They said, yep, this seems fishy. They did some interviews. The state police got involved. They did interviews. And then the FBI swooped in and decided to go off and take over the investigation because it determined that this GBI strategy company that was behind all these fake registrations was actually based in another state. It was based out in Tennessee, if I remember correctly. And so the FBI took it on, and then that's when, according to who you listen to, DOJ got involved to slow walk it to the point where the statute of limitations on all of the crimes that were identified through the investigation of law enforcement couldn't be acted upon with criminal indictments. And so we'll see how that all pans out. But the fact is, the president brought that up last night as an example of some funky business with our voter rolls. And, the basic theme of everything the president was talking about was they are manipulating our voter rolls. And what's the Department of Justice seeking right now in their lawsuits with all these states like Michigan with Jocelyn "We Will Come For You" Benson as our Secretary of State? They're seeking the voter roll data, and the states like Michigan are not providing it. Gee, I wonder why. It's because they're in on it and they're getting exposed. And we've got FBI 2.0 now. We've got DOJ 2.0. And the federal government is now looking into matters that they wanted buried a long time ago.
Yeah, this is interesting to me because, as you mentioned, so you have the China piece, you have the cover up, right, which is worse, right? And then the other piece of this is that you have all these non-citizens that are here across several states, hundreds of thousands that we know for a fact uncovered in this latest release as well. By the way, the documents all up at whitehouse.gov, folks. So you can go look at them yourself. Help share the program today. This is probably, if I asked you to share any program, it's probably this one. People need to see this more than almost anything else we've ever done. this is something that people need to know, they need to understand, and they need to see, because many of them didn't last night with CNN, ABC, and NBC refusing to cover this. I will say,
yeah, that's the key data point on it. Not only do people need to know it, but there were people actively making sure that they didn't see it and that they couldn't know it. That's the key takeaway I want to drill into everybody. That is at the core of all of everything that we're dealing with right now. And the faster we get over that hump, where we break through that Wizard of Oz curtain, if you will, and peel back that curtain like the president started the process of last night, the sooner we're going to get our country back.
Pat Callback, electioncrimebureau.com, PJ Callback over on X, and that's where you can find all of these updates from Pat. He's been working hard on all of this. I will give CBS a little credit. Last night they had John Solomon on, who took a little break from Just the News to advise and work with the president on these.
Conservative journalist John Solomon. He is an advisor to the president, to President Trump. He's leading a government transparency task force for the White House. He's also the man behind a lot of the research and the reporting that the president cited as true in this speech tonight. John, you heard the president. You also heard the senator say none of it is true or not new or not significant, and others have said that as well. Your response?
Well, listen, I talked to the intelligence chiefs in the last few days as we got prepared for this. It's very important to understand, the president said this tonight, every intelligence chief vetted this speech. They made sure it was accurate. They told me they had never been briefed on the size of the breaches, the 230 million Americans, the 220 million Americans whose data was stolen, that they consider it a security breach. How many times on your network have you reported that 5 countries are capable of hacking our election machines? When is the last time you reported that Venezuela actually succeeded in breaching a machine which has implications for our future security? You haven't, because it was never made public. It has not been made to Congress. It has not been told to the president in the past. We checked the presidential daily briefs. A president was kept from this information. Now we have a chance to fix a glass chin of election security, make the 26th election more secure than the last 3.
John, did the president, in his address tonight, we know he likes to ad-lib, did he overstep the information that you provided to him in any way, shape, or form?
Not that I've seen. I mean, I have to go back and compare everything, but no, I think the president stayed right where the intelligence community gave us this information, where it resides, and that is, we had a glass chin. We knew our election machines are vulnerable. We didn't patch them. We knew 230 million Americans' voter data was stolen by Chinese spies. Now think about this. When Equifax had the 147 million person breach 10 years ago, it was one of the biggest stories, one of the biggest data breaches. And this is larger than that. A foreign enemy has the ability now to register American voters, and that is something that concerned the Intelligence Committee. Thousands of pages of reports that we went through. We put several hundred of them out tonight. But if all of us are worried about when our bank account gets compromised, we should be just as worried when our voter file gets compromised, because it may affect a future election.
So, all right, let me ask you, Pat Callback, one of the comments. Nothing new. All of that has been debunked. How is it possible to say something like that when you have the head, as Solomon just mentioned, the heads of all of these intelligence bureaus coming together and saying, this is the first time you've heard this information. This information has been declassified. Well, it's all been put up online. I'm sure you've not had the time to read through it all. Many people who do this full time haven't had the time to read through it all just yet. So how could you make that case? And they're also telling us that they knew about this, or apparently these intelligence agencies knew about this and hid it from the president. So if they're hiding it from the president, how has any of this stuff been debunked? Is that even possible? And what kind of comment is that?
Well, keep in mind, this is coming from the same political ideology perspective that can't define what a man or a woman is. So this whole concept of truth, I think this all harkens back to Pontius Pilate, and when he asked the question, what is truth? That is at the core of everything we're dealing with, which is why I emphasize the fact that we're in the middle of an information war. And I think the first front that we need to win in this battle to retake our country during its 250th birthday is the information sector. And the president did a great job, I think, at kicking that off. And bringing in John Solomon, somebody with significant media experience, is a recognition of the fact that this is an information war at this point in time, and he's got to fight it at that level. And one nice thing about President Trump, more than anybody else, he gets the information war. He was the first one to label folks like the gentleman on CBS here as purveyors of fake news, and that's stuck, and people are starting to get it. And ultimately, it's showing the importance of going beyond the headline, going beyond the talking heads, talking points, and actually showing the receipts. And that's what the president did last night, is that he actually pointed to the documents in support of the assertions that he made to the American people. That's extremely important. And I think that's the way we're going to have to operate going forward. It's the way I like to operate all the time. And that's why I like to highlight that the findings that I put out on what happened in 2020 are all supported by numerous citations. So anyway, if you don't agree with what my interpretation of that data was, you can challenge it. If you don't agree with what the president said, challenge it in context of the source documents. That's not what they're doing. They're just trying to stick to a narrative and try to redefine that 2 + 2 = 5. And sorry, I'm not buying it.
Hey, this is a great tweet from Andrew Colvett. So let me get this straight. NBC and ABC will happily report the vaccine is safe and effective. Hunter's laptop was Russian disinformation. Joe Biden was at the top of his game. Kamala Harris was nominated in a democratic process. BLM riots were mostly peaceful. But they refused to carry the president of the United States primetime speech about whether or not the evidence exists of foreign election interference. If you're one of the few who still watch these two legacy outlets, please stop. They hate you. And again, the other piece is that they get nothing to see here, and they've been telling us that without evidence for years. Now you finally have the evidence. You have to confront it. You can't just say it doesn't exist, and you can't just say it's not real, because particularly at 9:39 a.m. after, less than really 12 hours after this stuff was all dropped and put up online at whitehouse.gov, you haven't had enough time to go through it all. It's impossible. So don't give me that. That's absolutely insane.
Yeah.
But the next question is, really, where do we go next? What happens now?
Well, I think this is just the first wave, if you will, or I call it the first salvo of direct outreach to the American people going around media outlets like NBC and CBS and ABC. And so I think Mark William Mullen out of DHS is going to be issuing a series of press conferences, if I heard correctly, on that topic. And it's just going to be just like what I'm doing right now with all the findings in that report. I'm actually posting them out once an hour out of my social media feed, so people get an understanding that this is not just one or onesie twosie pieces of election evidence. It is freaking overwhelming. I think that the federal government is going to be doing a lot more on that front. And so I think we're just seeing the opening barrage. And I think the next week is going to be filled with time and time again, a constant release of information directly to the American people.
Additional documents that are coming out, and troves of them that you can count on.
Yeah, I mean, I've just been focused on open source intelligence. I've been limited to what I can get via FOIA requests, via examination of court records, via public websites. That's my limit. These guys have access to all the tools of the intel community. They got a lot more information available than what we do, and I'm very confident, based on my discussion with folks, that we've got a lot more to share on this front. And I just, people buckle up. I know it's tedious. I've been at this for 6 years. I'm tired of the ingest cycle. I get it. I want the accountability phase, but unfortunately, 90% of the American people have been prohibited from seeing this information. So it's almost like going into a classroom and you've completed your PhD thesis, and the teacher, in this case President Trump and his administration, are forced to provide remedial education to to your classmates before they can actually get to the really good stuff. And that's the stage we're at right now.
Yeah. Chinese theft of U.S. voter data, the cover-up of that very situation, voting machine vulnerabilities we were told for years just weren't there. Massive scale of fraud that we talked about out of Muskegon that really was prevalent, sounds like, throughout the rest of the country as well. And then lots of these foreign nationals, approximately almost 30,000 non-citizens identified on voter rolls in 12 states that these are the ones that cooperated. That said, we'll work with you.
I think it was much larger than that. I think it was 278,000.
250,000 were on states that had not previously cooperated. So yeah, you're right. 278,000 together, nearly 300,000. Now officials
That's in 4 states. That's huge.
Yes. Yeah, 4 states alone. Officials estimate, though, nationwide the total could be significantly higher, over 1 million or more, just based on the modeling of what we have in those other states. Yep. So that's massive. And as you mentioned, all of these documents will continue to come out. You're going to start to see more action by the Department of Homeland Security and a couple other agencies. And eventually some of this is going to have to make it to the Supreme Court. And, we're in for quite a ride. Now, somebody asked again about Jocelyn Benson. Folks, I got to tell you, whether Benson is allowed or isn't allowed is going to be that she's already said she's going to recuse herself. But you've got to understand this. It's the same thing as when, whether Barack Obama gave marching orders to people or not, didn't need to in the deep state. The people that are working inside the Secretary of State in that office for Jocelyn Benson don't need to hear it out of Jocelyn Benson's mouth, whether she really does recuse herself or not. They already have their marching orders. They already know the drones already know what to do. They've already got their commands.
Yes. She's already put out the rule set. She's essentially defined the rules of the game for the upcoming football game. And she's issued rule sets that make it extremely difficult, if not impossible, to remove illegal voters from our voter rolls. She's put in rules around our electronic voting systems that make them more insecure across the board. She's helped implement this early voting fiasco, which is all designed to create chaos and confusion and get rid of the audit trail in our elections. So no, her damage has already been done, frankly. And that's even before we get to her seeding our voter file with illegal voters.
Yeah. This is all of this, folks. Again, will continue to develop. It doesn't matter what people like Steve in the chat here say. Steve is, again, repeating a narrative that he was brainwashed with by these networks and other people that isn't based in fact today. Steve is saying Trump has gone to court already 60 times and lost with this information. No, he hasn't. The information that came out last night is brand new, Steve. What about declassified information being released for the first time? You haven't had the time to even read it yet, and you said he's been to court with it. That's absolutely insane. And quite frankly, please stop saying it in the chat. It just makes you look like an idiot.
Well, let's go one step further than that, Justin. Those 64 lawsuits that are typically referenced by folks like Steve that says that this has already been decided in the courts. The courts decided that there is no evidence of election fraud. I've got a post on this that goes into detail on it at theelectioncrimebureau.com. But if you actually analyze those 64 suits, what you'll find is that over 50% of them were dismissed without any consideration of the evidence whatsoever.
They didn't even look at the evidence.
Right. And then for the other ones that were out there, only 3 of those 64 had any discovery at all. And then only one had any substantive discovery at all. And that was in Antrim County. And guess what the judge said in that case in his oral argument when he was giving his judgment? He said, I'm not saying that there's not plenty of evidence of malfeasance in this that's been discovered through the discovery phase. All I'm saying is that the remedy that was sought by the plaintiffs in this case has already been addressed to my satisfaction, and I'm going to dismiss the case. So, and by the way, all those cases that were dismissed on the basis of standing, they should be retried because per the Bose versus Illinois ruling, by the U.S. Supreme Court, all those cases were dismissed unlawfully. It was against the Constitution. So I'm tired of that balderdash from folks like Steve that says there is no court that decided that there's evidence of election fraud. They all said that there is no evidence. That's balderdash. And so the problem is you got to dig into the details, and most media outlets don't want you to do that.
Folks, we're going to continue to cover this. Please stick with Pat, PJ Colbeck over on Twitter X, electioncrimebureau.com, and you can get updates. You can get in-depth detail. Please go to the whitehouse.gov website. Look at the information yourself. Look at the classified documents that are now declassified, contrary to what the bots in the chat are going to say. But this is important so you can make the determination, and you can have these conversations with people you love and you care about. That's where this is really going to happen, where people hear these things. It's not going to be some bot in the chat coming back saying things that don't even make sense. They can't even see it themselves. But when you talk to your friends and your neighbors and you have conversations, they say something like, well, they already have these court cases and there was no evidence, and you're talking about the evidence that was just released, declassified by the intelligence communities, by the president, that came out this week. That evidence is talking about that's the evidence that was seen because it doesn't make sense. The timelines don't add up. Some of these people, they just don't see it. But when you have conversations, and I think you can do it with grace, right, in a way that you have these conversations with your friends and your relatives, I think they can start to see through some of these things and actually make a difference. Now,
well, actually, you highlight something very important, Justin. This is something that I just want to call on all the folks that are actively seeking truth, and particularly who follow Christ, is that we act in a Christ-like manner. I mean, I'll tell you, a lot of these people get under my freaking skin. I get it. I understand. We're all human, right? But how we respond is as important as what we respond with. And so I want to encourage everybody, because it's not just you that you're putting those posts out. You're putting them out to a broader audience that's trying to see who's the rational person here, who is somebody that I want to hang with, who's the person that I want to hear more from, versus folks like Steve that are just peddling lies, right? You got to go off and do so. My pastor likes to say it this way. We need to speak in both truth and in love. If you do all love and no truth, well, that ain't going to do anybody any good. And if you do all truth, no love, nobody's going to want to listen to you. The difficulty and the challenge and the good is that as Christians, we got to do truth in love. And if you feel like you're struggling in that area, just give it to God and be confident in the fact that you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you.
Amen. All right, folks, we'll continue. Another big push, getting on the phone, calling the senators. I know Slotkin may not be, very excited to move. Gary Peters may not be excited to move, but you overwhelm those phones, not just here in Michigan, but throughout the country, to tell them to pass the Save America Act, get that done. If they get 100 million phone calls tomorrow or today, they're going to get the message. These people need to get the message. And I think we're on the way.
Justin, I saw one quick message from John Van Buren saying our own Republicans and leadership said there wasn't enough evidence to look at it. And I want to make sure everybody understands I have very clear evidence that the Republicans who looked at who were tasked with looking into the 2020 election and put out that report, they didn't look at all the evidence. I've actually got evidence of the fact that they did not examine all the information that they had subpoenaed from the cities of Detroit and Livonia. So please don't go down that Republicans did the investigation, said that there's nothing to it. Yeah. They didn't look at the information either.
John makes a point. How can you say, even if you refuse to look at it, how do you find the evidence if you even refuse to look into it? It's a great point. Always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you, Patrick Colbeck. Thank you for your fight. I'm going to get back to family. It was trying to take the day off, but this was so big we had to do it.
Well, I feel like your family, Justin, so I appreciate it. And yes. By the way, all the listeners that are out there, If I put out something on social media or whatever that is not acting in a Christ-like manner, call me on it. All right. And I mean that. So I'm doing my best to rein things in to get the truth out to folks, but I'll tell you, make sure I'm doing truth and love. All right. All right. Thank you. Happy birthday, Justin. Enjoy the rest of the vacation here. And I'm sure you're not going to talk about politics the rest of the day, right?
No, not at all. Not at all. God bless you, brother. Appreciate you. Pat Colbeck.
Right.
PJ Colbeck over on X and Election Crime Bureau is where you can find him as well online. All right, folks. There you have it. Well, I don't know. It's just kind of like the icing on the cake for my birthday. Barely scratching the surface, but look. So happy to be able to do it. Spicy Chemist over on Rumble today, our winner. Winning something cool from inside the Justin store. You can just send me an email, Spicy. Let me know what you want. Tea, mug, thermos. We try to do this every day. Sharing is caring. That's the content we do. Help get the word out. Thank you so much for the folks that constantly support us in the Freedom Fam. You make it possible. Thanks to Maha Missy and My Pure Health Solutions. Call them today at 269-964-4044, down 40 pounds or more. Myself, my wife, and so many other people that listen to this program. The couples actually getting and doing this together, I think, is a great way to do it. You have great support. Help each other as you walk alongside and get it done together. And, man, you're going to feel better than ever. Weight loss. People are getting off medications. They're having a great experience where they get off their sleep apnea treatments as well at night. Have all kinds of great sleep and then have energy throughout the day. Women lose 2 to 3 pant sizes in 40 days. I mean, it carried 40 days. It's really incredible. Men, you do even better. That's how great this program is. Healthwithjustin.com. And then Mike Lindell, how could we not say thanks to Mike for being in this fight? MyPillow.com, mystore.com/Justin. MyPillow.com, mystore.com/Justin with the Mega 2 sale. Towels, sheets, pillows, and more, all for sale in that coffee, which I love. 50% off right now. When you go, support our sponsors. Thank you, folks. Appreciate you. Make it a great one. God bless.